Morning guys, I want to show you an interesting pattern that stood out to me on the Aussie 200. So if we look at yesterday afternoon, you can see that we got this really sharp aftermarket sell-off here. So essentially from 4 p.m. onwards, the market moved really sharply lower after our ASX cash session had finished up. So whenever I see something like this, the question, it's not necessarily, is this super bullish? It's like, okay, what happens after this? What does this mean in the grand scheme of things? Because this aftermarket period, it's fairly kind of unique in terms of, obviously that cash market's closed, institutions start clearing their positions, futures are adjusting, essentially markets, digesting everything that's happened through the flurry of the cash session. So I guess the question is, when we get these big falls in the aftermarket, does that usually mark the low, or, does the market often rally off that, etc., etc.? So to kind of interrogate that, let's jump into Data Lab. So all I've done here is filter for occasions where the Aussie aftermarket has finished down more than 5 points. Okay, so then I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, I want to know, when normally is the low of that entire overnight session. So what I found was pretty interesting. So we've got 154 occurrences here. So here's the filter. If you have a look through and you just select, okay, out of those 154, how many lows of the entire overnight session are at 4 p.m, you get 11. So, do the maths on that. That's about 7% of the time that aftermarket was the low of the entire evening, okay? So, flip that on its head, and that's saying around 93% of the time the market kind of continued doing work after that aftermarket session had finished to the downside. So that's the important takeaway. Not that that market has to go lower, but historically, this aftermarket weakness has kind of has broken at some point through the night. So, what does that mean from a trading perspective? So for me, obviously, creates a bit of a bearish lean. If the market rallies strongly after one of these aftermarket falls, I'm naturally kind of asking, whether that rally is sustainable. So you see here that we got a nice gap up. I think the UK rallied hard from its open. So we got this big gap up here. But all the while, we kind of know that there's a 93% probability that we're going to break lower here. So it's not a signal, I'm not saying sell immediately. Price action obviously still matters, but if the market started rallying aggressively after an aftermarket sell-off, you're trading against historical tendency as that price is kind of moving higher. So that helps me frame the risk a little bit. So the other thing that I just mentioned here is, I've saved that as an alert, as an example. So up here you can obviously see that you can add the alert. I've done that. Over here you can see aftermarket fall, Aussie 200 aftermarket less than -5. So as soon as that 430 kind of finishes, if the aftermarket's down more than 5 points, I'll get an alert. So, this isn't a setup that happens every day, but when it does happen, I want to know about it immediately. So I can kind of keep a watch then. If the market rallies higher, I know I've got a really high probability that it's going to be breaking those lows at some point throughout the night. So that's the aftermarket fall. I'll see you tomorrow.